We've talked about a lot of issues surrounding the events in Charlottesville. We've talked about how the downside of politics is that people never really get everything that they want, quoting David Brooks from his column in 2016. Disappointment is normal, but if we get our politics wrong, according to Charles Krauthammer, everything we have stands to be swept away, in his book, Things That Matter. Joining us now, who is a gentleman running from Richmond, running for Attorney General, is one of those candidates who is hopefully going to help fix our political process or be a solution in that regard as far as the way he runs his campaign. He's running, I think, a pretty good campaign, clean campaign. We like that in politics, especially at Virginia Free. I'm the executive director of Virginia Free now, a nonpartisan nonprofit. Welcoming to the John Fredericks Show, John Adams. John, you there?
Hey, sure am, Chris. Good to see you.
Good to talk to you, man. How you doing today?
Yeah, we're doing okay. Doing all right.
What are your thoughts on Charlottesville?
Well, you know, Chris, that was a tough day. We were campaigning out in Southwest Virginia, monitoring the events, and, you know, I sort of called it like I saw it. Early in the morning, before the violence turned, you know, horrific, I sent a message out saying, look, we've got people marching in Charlottesville with Nazi flags, chanting Nazi slogans, and, you know, we're the country that fought and defeated that ideology. And we just need to be clear about our disdain for these views. And that's who we are as a people. And when you see things like that, you got to call it like you see it. And unfortunately, we saw, you know, agitation turn into violence. And I would just tell your listeners, you know, as we go forward, the media sort of exacerbates this problem by sort of constantly churning it. I can tell you, having traveled the Commonwealth in a vehicle for the last 18 months, you know, Virginia is made up of some of the kindest, nicest, caring people you'd ever want to meet. And we can't let this incredibly small group of people, many of whom came in from out of state, get the better of us. And so it was just a tough day, Chris, as you know, and now we got to move forward, and we got to move forward the way Virginians and Americans should, which is peacefully and confidently, and move ahead and start the healing process.
What? Take us through that process. I mean, you're a statewide candidate. You've been running, you said, for 18 months or so. Probably some part of that was unofficial. Now it's official. Obviously, you have the nomination of the Republican Party. How do we keep this from spreading? First of all, and how do we get better in our own politics rather than saying, "Oh, that's part of us"? No, it's not. I think we can step up over this at the same time.
Yeah, I think what we have to do is recognize that one of the biggest things we have to do, Chris, is recognize that we live in a world that is ultra magnified by social media and the mainstream press. This was a relatively small group of people who came in primarily from out of state. The way to do this is learn from it and say, you know what, the next time a group obtains a permit to do something like this, don't go down and counter-protest and join them and set ourselves up for another situation of violence. You know, just these folks, they don't have a large platform, and so don't give them any more voice than that which they deserve. And stay away from it. You know, can you imagine had people said, you know what, we're not going to go down and counter-protest. We're going to go to another location. We'll do our own separate event later. These folks would have gotten almost no media attention. And so, you know, I just think going forward, we have to be really smart about how we handle these situations. I was incredibly upset to see in the city of Richmond. You know, I'm born and raised here in Chesterfield County. The night before last, there was another protest, a counter-protest, and it got violent, and a reporter got hit in the head. And you know, we just people have to take a deep breath and step back from this and realize that on all sides of this thing, this is a very small sort of outlier group of folks. And I just think sometimes because of mainstream media and social media, we amp it up a little bit more than it should be.
Well, I think the governor was very explicit before this and said, "People, just stay away from this. Don't add add any more fuel to this fire. Let's just y'all stay away." But some people, not that they couldn't help themselves, chose to be there and chose to have the fight. They showed up to have the fight. I mean, a photojournalist in Stanton said, you know, the kids, some of these people who were there, college-age kids, he said, largely white, were there to fight. They looked like they were there to fight. And I don't know what we can do to separate these two groups when these things happen so that they don't engage. And I don't know what the legal process is in that. You're a lawyer. You want to be the I don't like saying the top cop for attorney general because that's not really what it is.
That's right.
But it's just
that's right.
You're corporate counsel. Let's be honest with it, right? Tell us what we can do in Virginia and across the nation to keep groups like this who want to have a fight not fighting.
Well, I mean, clearly, you know, when these types of events occur, you want to create a buffer zone. You know, my understanding is the police in Seattle had a similar event, and that's the way they handled it. So I just think, look, all of these things in life, you learn from them. You learn the best possible tactics. And that's just what you have to employ going forward. But look, I think, you know, the governor's advice was spot on, right? When something like this happens, you don't go to it. You just let it run its course, and then it goes away, and less media attention comes to it, and less potential for real violence can occur. So, I mean, that's the one thing we've got to do. We got to step back and calmer heads, you know, will prevail. I believe that in the long run. We live in a great state. We have wonderful citizens. You know, it was so troubling to see so many out-of-state people come in, and then have this event, you know, really focus on Charlottesville. Just, you hate to see Charlottesville in that situation.
No, you don't like that. But what I think has been, if you want to put a little optimist hat on, is the universal, bipartisan, across all spectrums condemnation of this activity. That it is, you know, it's how we define us by saying that's not who we are. That's not who we want to be, and that has been universal. So I think we might be. I'm gonna put on my optimist hat here. Hopefully, that will, you know, convey to the rest of our political establishment in Washington that, you know, with the bill, you know, the healthcare bill dying in Washington, you know, and McCain's called for the committee process and to be bipartisan and do it the right way. This will hopefully create this ethos in our country that we can do better, and we will do better, and that the public will respond to that in kind by saying, that's what we support. That's what we want from our political leaders.
Well, you know, at the end of the day, that's right. I mean, what people expect is good government. I always use this discussion when I'm out talking to folks. The rest of us in the world, because remember, and I think you know this, Chris, I've never run for anything before in my life. This is my first time doing it. And so I say all the time, I'm not a politician. It's true. And I always looked at politicians and thought, if they were like the rest of us and had to show up on time for work every day and get things done in a real-time basis, right? Or there were severe consequences, right? If you go to work and you just don't get things done, your time in that job is going to be extremely limited. And I think that's why the American people look at our political process and go, look, we need you guys to get up there and do some very fairly basic things and get them done. And that's what they expect, and that's what they should get. And there's no reason for name-calling. There's no reason for, you know, the sort of gutter sort of politics we've seen. You know, I'm running a campaign based on very clear ideas and a very clear vision, and it's diametrically opposed in many ways to my opponent. It doesn't mean I call my opponent dirty names. In fact, I don't. You know, Mark Herring and I have a very respectful relationship. We both agree that we see the role of the Attorney General in a very different way. And we have that debate. We have a vigorous debate, but it's, you know, it's respectful of your fellow human beings, which is something we need to make sure we hold on to in this country and in this Commonwealth. Well,
that's good, because I think Virginia does it a whole lot better than Washington, D.C., and if you are fortunate enough to to when you'll see that process in place. We do get a lot done in Virginia in 60 and 45 days, depending upon the session. I think the single object rule helps us get there. That means we just talk about one issue on a bill and that's it. And then fundraising is not during session. I think that helps, create a firewall between the corruptible practices that could take place. And then if someone's going to offer an amendment to a bill and that amendment is accepted, that person is obligated under Jefferson's manual to support that legislation in the end, so we don't have these poison pill amendments. John, I think we have joining us Martha Boneta. Martha is with the Citizens for the Republic, and as you know, from Paris, Virginia. Martha, are you there?
Yes, I am. Good morning, and I'm a huge fan of John Adams, and I'm really looking forward to helping get him to victory because he's going to be an incredible Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Virginia.
Hey, Martha, good morning.
This message is brought to you by...
Good morning. Good morning. Really thrilled to have you on the show with you, and I couldn't agree with you more in terms of, what happened in Charlottesville.
John, that's for you.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's it is what I called it like I saw it, and we've got to have a real discussion about where we are in the country. I mean, you look in the Commonwealth of Virginia, just go back 60 days, and you have the shooting of the Republican congressman on the baseball field, very clearly because of their ideology, because of their political persuasion. And then you go down to Charlottesville almost 60 days later, and you have this sort of violence based on a little bit of racial lines, but also political lines too, I think. And so we just have to. We've seen a line crossed in Virginia twice in the last 60 days, and we're so much better than that. And I think in both cases, a lot of the folks came from out of state, but we've got to be leaders in this country, in Virginia. We have done it since the beginning, and we will continue to do it. And we can have a good political discourse without crossing that line into violence.
I'm glad you brought up.
That's just
John,
required.
Martha, let me jump in here, Martha.
Absolutely.
Martha.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Martha.
We can't have what happened in North Carolina, where there are protesters taking it upon themselves to tear down statues. And I really applaud. In Richmond, I believe the mayor came out. There's been an application to have another protest in Richmond about our monuments on Monument Avenue. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mayor came out and said that he felt like the monuments, the statues should stay. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. He's directed his commission that removing the monuments is not an option. The commission is going to consider should they add some things to add context. That's my understanding of the process right now. And I think that's right. We don't. When people try to tell you that you should remove history, you should be very concerned. And so I agree with that wholeheartedly. And so
yes.
We'll see where this goes. I was very troubled to see the events in Raleigh. I mean, that's vandalism. It looks, it breaks your heart because then it starts to make. It just looks like a level of lawlessness that we really can't have here in America. And so, we'll see what happens. I'm very confident calmer heads are going to prevail as we move forward. We've got to get through this recent event. We got to learn from it. We got to do better going forward. Chris, you were going to say something, I think.
Yeah, I appreciate that, John. And I really thank you for bringing up the event with Congressman Scalise and the shooting that occurred there. Can you imagine what would have happened if that guy had showed up to Charlottesville?
Oh.
I mean, just horrific, right? I mean, you have one guy with who's coming in there to just gun these people down, and then you have a militia surrounding those people, and then just all hell would have broken loose. And this is why it's so very important for our public safety officials to know exactly what's going on. So the intelligence, and I think what has been universally accepted is that our response, the government's response, the state government, the Governor McAuliffe, everyone involved in this, limiting the exposure of this, limiting the violence, and condemning what happened at the same time has been broad and across the board, and I think a hallmark to who we are as a people.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Ed Gillespie, Tom Garrett, so proud of how they handled the response to Charlottesville. It was spot on, and you as well, John. It's a bipartisan condemnation of the violence in Charlottesville.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is, this condemning what happened is not difficult. What we have to do now, though, is move forward and make sure that we need to be mindful, right, for these things. When you're watching things on the news, when you're hearing reports, when you're seeing the tweets, right, just be mindful that this was a very small number of people, and their actions and their language and their ideology. And this is true, by the way, across the board. This is whatever you want to call it, alt-right, alt-left, these groups that espouse identity politics in the extreme, right? These groups are very small, but they get a huge megaphone from social media and from the media, who's got a 24 news cycle to fill. And I just think for all of us in Virginia, just keep in mind that in some ways this is being blown up much bigger than it is in terms of the numbers of people that are involved in these types of things. And it's we, the citizens, who need to stand up and say, no, this is not us. This is not the way we behave. What you're doing is illegal. We will not tolerate violence. We will not tolerate vandalism. We will not tolerate this in our society.
And we also have to take it away and not let it grow.
Yeah.
Look, these movements, these events can be inoculated if they're cordoned off so they don't grow. And that's important, not just to say, okay, that's wrong, but not let it continue and dissemble their arguments and dissemble their hatred. Martha, go ahead.
Well, it's interesting. The gentleman that has requested the permit to be able to, have a rally in Richmond, he's actually a Confederate heritage advocate. And one of the things that he wanted to make clear is that he said, quote, "I don't want any of the nuts at my rally." And his point being, all these people were bused into Virginia, and, they had their own agendas. And he's saying, look, I love my heritage, and that's why I'm here. I'm not here to make any kind of a political statement beyond the fact that I don't think we should be tearing down our, American history monuments. So, nuts stay home. I mean, I bring that up just to say that you're right in terms of, the media obsession and the narrative that's being, pushed out there, Chris. And I really believe that, as far as Virginia's, I know you had Brian Moran on yesterday, and as far as the way, Virginia, security, I guess he's, Brian Moran's in charge of, I guess, I don't know how many folks, but he had over 1,000 people there, from the Virginia State Police all the way down to responders there on site. And they did the best they could. We lost, my heart is broken, and my prayers are with the families, of the two state troopers, and of course the one citizen that was there. But, Virginia is strong. I love Virginia with all my heart. And we will move forward from this, and we will remain strong. And I have full faith in our ticket of Ed Gillespie and Jill Vogel and John Adams to once in office, to make sure that what happened in Charlottesville, the violence and the deaths and just the vitriol, doesn't happen again.
Okay, John, want to wrap it up here?
Yeah, sure. Look, I appreciate you having me on. Really been on the trail now for, gosh, like I said, a year and a half. And it's just been such an incredible experience to travel all across Virginia, been in almost everywhere, most places multiple times. And we just live in such a great place.
Yep.
And we have so many great people. And you go out and you see things like this heroin opioid epidemic and how tragic it is. But then you see all these wonderful Virginians. And I'm talking about private citizens. I'm talking about government officials who are all working hard to fix it, working hard to try to get ahead of it, working hard to make it better.
That's right.
And I've met with all these folks, and there is so much good in this Commonwealth. And so I just want to share with the listeners, I am an optimist. You mentioned, Chris, putting on your optimist hat. I'm an optimist. And we have such a great Commonwealth. we're going to get through this. Undeniably, Saturday was the worst day for me on the campaign trail. It was just a heartbreaking day, and it just kept happening, right? Worse and worse. But I'm telling you, when you look at Virginia, it is a wonderful place full of wonderful folks, and I'm excited to get back out on the road today and keep going and working and meeting folks. So thank you so much for having me on, Martha. It was good to be on with you as well.
Thanks, John. Thanks, Martha. This is Chris Saxman filling in for John Fredericks, vacationing John